Welcome to the Sanskrit Podcast, where the ideas of ancient India meet the modern world. Today, our guest is Sandeep Balakrishna. His interests span both literary and socio-political. He is an author, writer, literary critic, and translator. He's written a book called Tipu Sultan, The Tyrant of Mysore, and The Madurai Sultanate, A Concise History. He has also translated Dr. S.L. Bhyrappa's magnum opus Avarana into English. Namaste, Sandeep. Thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Sandeep is here to talk about the Indian conception of history, which leads to the first question. What do you mean by the Indian conception of history?
Before just coming to the conception of history itself, to the conception of time as a concept. So how the Western world views time, how the Western mind views time, and how the Indian mind views time. The Indian mind views time as cyclic. That is where you get the concept of repeating yugas or cycles of 4 yugas, which keeps repeating ad infinitum.
Yes.
And whereas the Western mind, which views time in a linear fashion.
Yes.
So if you take this as a basis, you will see a vast difference in approach between the way the Western mind views history, it conceptualizes history, and that of the Indian mind.
So the Manvantras and all that Adya Brahmane, Dvitiya Prartha, that is all cyclical. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we start with time as a big difference between the Western concept of history, and which is linear, and the Indian concept. Any other differences, or what point would you like to move on to next?
Well, if you look at the way history or historiography, that is the study of history, and how you approach history, is commonly studied today in across the world, maybe all the major Western and Indian universities. It is based again on the linear concept of time, that okay, there is a starting point somewhere here, and then like I say in one of my pieces, that history is a diary without an ending book, an ending page.
Correct.
So if you, from that perspective, it just becomes a series of dates, events and happenings in a linear fashion.
Correct.
Okay, you start with the point X, and keep going on till the present and future.
Correct.
So whereas the Indian conception of history, we have a specific word for it. It's called itihasa, which means iti plus ha plus asa, which means this, literally, this happened thus.
Okay.
So that means if Rama is married, for example, Sita, it happened thus. You do not
worry so much.
You do not worry so much about whether he married in 5000 BC or 5222 BC, October 24th, at whatever.
The calendar is not
so
important.
Not that significant.
Okay.
So if you look at it from that perspective, you can always have Ramayanas throughout all the 4 yugas.
Yes. So they are more interested in not in bookmarking an event to a particular date,
and analyzing it, clinically.
Yes.
But more as a value. History, itihasa, is more a value that you can inculcate, imbibe in your life, pass it on to subsequent generations.
As you said in your article, it's more about what can I learn from
what
this
can I
happened
learn from
thus.
It, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, so this is an entirely new concept. So how does that frame how you think? So if itihasa is about personalities and events and what we learn from them, does it frame how you think about everything? So you're not memorizing Battle of Panipat happened this time and that time.
Exactly. So I'll to answer this, I'll give you an allegory and an analogy. For instance, let's take any historical event. Let's say Battle of Panipat. Now, when you read that in your textbooks in school, you read that as a dry sequence of events. Somebody came in there from somewhere and he had cannons and guns, and this was the date he did. So this is where it is limited to. But on the other hand, you take that and convert it into historical fiction. Now, historical fiction over the last at least 60 to 70 years, if not more, has been a huge bestseller.
Correct.
Both in India as well as the West. So why does it appeal? The same history, why does it appeal when you fictionalize it?
Because you're talking about all
Because it entertains you.
Correct, correct.
Who doesn't want to read a well-written novel or a book or a essay
Yes.
or a piece of fiction, it
Yes.
entertains you.
Yes.
In the process, you also get to learn history.
Yes, okay. Which is probably why in one of our podcasts we were talking about the poets, and nobody really knows when they did
When
what
they did,
or
yes.
when they
so
lived.
that again, it's very good that you brought this point up. Most of until the Westerners came in and started studying our disciplines, be it art, whatever it is, we didn't bother too much about dates, about
Yes.
when this guy was born, when Kalidasa was born, when he died.
Yes,
You recognize him as a rishi, as someone who's given a very great gift to the world, which is probably eternal, long
yes,
lasting
yes,
at least.
Yes,
So you don't bother too much about where he lived, where he roamed,
Yes.
whose patronage. Of course, it's nice to have those things, but that assumes a secondary place
yes.
as compared to what he's given us.
Yes, yes. So taking that a little bit further, so Indians, would you say, are not, or ancient Indians were not interested in biographies. They were not interested in the personality as much as the product of what so be it a poetic work or a, would it, but now today everybody
Yeah, to an extent that is true. Like I said, I mean, just to summarize what you said in one word, they were more interested in the value that it offered us than the guy himself.
Yeah, okay. Valmiki also, do we know a lot or?
Not much. I mean, there's been tons of material written about his life, whether he existed at all.
Yes.
Now, if you look at that mischief that was started by A.K. Ramanujam's 300 Ramayanas,
Yes.
so you keep tying up yourself in knots.
Yes.
Those things are not history. I mean, much less historiography.
Yes.
They're just, let me put it this way, ideological packaging, academic packaging of ideology.
Okay. Now, is there a link between Itihasa and Purana in our ancient times? As in, it is like what you said is the fictionalization of his Itihasa as Purana. Is that a fair thing or not really?
More or less. I mean, they're interrelated. You can't, there's no fine-grained difference as such.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about the fictionalization of history, which you say makes it accessible to the general public. Are there examples that, or is there a way we can elaborate on that?
In what sense?
So the fictionalization of history, are there examples in the past where people, I'm only thinking of the Puranas, people took the Puranas and they took historical, this happened thus, and made it into a story.
Yeah.
Did they add fictional elements to the...
Oh, plenty of them. Plenty of them.
So
Yeah, plenty of them. For example, now you have these different Vratakathas, right?
yes.
Biggest one is after the upcoming Ganesha festival.
Yes.
We have that whole Vratakatha with the Sattarajita where Krishna looks at the moon and then he gets cursed and, so that is a completely fictional element.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then there's one element of that in the Bhagavatam, that whole Sattarajita and Syamantaka episode that is taken directly from Bhagavatam and creatively incorporated here in the Ganesha Vratakatha.
So the Satyanarayana Vratakatha,
Satyanarayana
Varalakshmi,
Vratakatha, yeah.
all are...
I mean, there are so many fictional places, Avantipura, some this Pura, that Pura, some king. What this shows is that there was a very vibrant space for creative experimentation, which gradually was absorbed by the masses because they saw the ultimate value in doing these things.
That's very interesting. Yeah. Compared to now, where now it seems like India is moving in the path of, absolutes. Our history was this, and therefore if you go Rakshak, and the whole thing is become much more specific. So how has it changed your conception of, has it changed you as a socio-political writer, and has it changed your approach to history, this knowledge?
It has made me appreciate the subtler aspects and it's increased my reverence for the culture that has given birth to it. To sum up how it has changed.
Yeah. What does subtler aspects mean, in that sense that there is no one way of saying it and there are multiple...
There are multiple ways of saying it, and there is this whole so-called diversity that people talk about. There is no more greater example of diversity than this thing.
Yes, correct. That, as you said earlier, this creative expression was not only allowed, it was encouraged. And
Absolutely.
And that word, itihasa, is this happened thus, is a very, I didn't know that, certainly.
So one other way it gets reflected is on an average, how many new temples get built every day across the world?
A lot.
Why do they do it?
I think it's a way of...
That is one way you preserve your history also.
Correct.
The conception of itihasa.
Correct. Codify it, yeah. But yours, I was going to say codify it, but that's not really what you're saying, is that it wasn't codified. It was used as a way to allow the flowering of expression. Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about the Indian conception of history, which I want you to talk about it in the current times and whether you agree with it, because it seems to me as a layperson that we are moving more and more towards the opposite of that. We are saying that it was like this, you will worship it because it was like this, and you will not behave in do this and this way because our history says so. So it seems like it's becoming much more rigid. Do you think that's a good thing? I mean, or is it inevitable?
On the contrary, the state of affairs that you describe right now has its roots maybe say 50, 60 years back. Almost after a decade after independence or around about that.
Yes.
When history became a vehicle for propagating ideology.
Yes, correct.
So when you don't teach truth, I mean codification, etc., whatever, that aside, even if a Hindu king did something grievously wrong, say it as it is. You don't do that, and you create an imbalance.
The propaganda machine takes
over. And you get to this state of affairs.
So the openness of interpretation, the willingness to say, we also messed up.
Just the willingness to say the truth, study the truth and say it as it is. Now what's happening, and this happens from maybe childhood, your history textbooks. A child is taught that all your ancestors are idiots, they are violent people. This country where you're born in has nothing of value. And once he graduates at 21, the first thing he will seek is to get out of this wretched country. And then you blame it on, brain drain, or there could be other factors, but then there is nothing that binds you to this country where you were born in. So this is what history has done.
Do you think the pendulum will swing in that we have reached a certain state of affairs? So it's gone from the openness and creative expression around history to more and more codifying and memorizing and the Western ideas of
propaganda, basically not even codification.
Yeah, you're right.
It's propaganda.
Yeah, but do you think it will swing back as all historical events do, but not really?
Well, if and I do believe that time is cyclical.
Yes.
So maybe it will.
Yeah. So on that note, I have run out of questions. Have I not asked you something that you are thinking about that our listeners should know in terms of historical ideas that are powerful, okay, that's a good way to end it. So if you were to address a school child today or a classroom today, what would you tell them about the Indian concept of history? What are 2 or 3 things that they should know that they perhaps don't learn in history books? Like you said about the cyclical aspect of time and any others.
Yeah, that is one. And the second one is to tell them that like most things in life, like most good things in life, history should also be looked at primarily as a value, not as a collection of facts and dates and information. And second thing is that there is a reason, a binding factor that should keep you rooted to the place you were born in.
Which would be itihasa?
Which would be your cultural, all the positive aspects of your cultural heritage, which are not taught.
So you're right, the values are not taught, the dates are taught. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I think you've certainly opened my mind to how history should be learned and how it has been learned. Hopefully the textbooks will get rewritten.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.